Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me stand on existing protocols. I see many regulators here. I see lawmakers here. I see senior brothers, elders in the industry. So let me say I recognize everyone. Today, this morning, I have the privilege of speaking on how to deepen the Nigerian capital markets to include privatized and systemically important entities. So let me say that as chairman of S. Holdings and United Bank for Africa, it is indeed a big pleasure to be here with all of you to represent a segment of the Nigerian private sector in this very important dialogue on how to develop concrete policy to help stimulate our national economy. I want to start by thanking Senator Adeleke and the Honorable Tajuddin Yusuf for the kind invitation to speak to you. This forum represents the continuing commitment of our National Assembly to engage with the Nigerian people on how, and the private sector in particular, on how to identify and resolve legislative, regulatory, and institutional impediments to commercial activity and economic growth in Nigeria. At a public gathering of legislators in March this year, I commended the National Assembly for recognizing that, one, our laws are not perfect, that we need to review, amend, and enhance many of them to improve the lives of our citizens. And two, that the proper role of government is not to provide employment for everyone, but to create, sustain, and secure an enabling environment for citizens to independently create their own jobs and their success using their own talents. And lastly, that the private sector is the engine for growth, the engine for economic growth in Nigeria and anywhere else. So you can imagine how I felt when I got this invitation from Tajuddin and Senator Adeleke to share one's perspective on how to improve, as I put it, the lives of every Nigerian. Because what is good for the private sector is actually good for every one of us. So I want to say to our legislators, well done for organizing this. Well done for showing interest how to move our economy forward. But these dialogues and seminars should not be construed as an end on its own. This should be seen as the commencement of the journey, of a process that will help us usher in good economic development in Nigeria. So, no feeling or sense of accomplishment yet, because there's plenty of job to be done. And I'm sure you've been discussing some of this since yesterday, and we'll talk more today. The private sector has the most critical role to play in all of this, once the enabling environment is provided. And the private sector also has the most capital to drive our economy, and not just our economy, all economies in the 21st century. And the private sector must take over the role that government has wrongly assumed all these years. But for that to happen, the government must focus on its role, its proper role in creating, improving, and strengthening the enabling environment for businesses. And government, as you know, is not the only the executive arm of government. At times when at sessions like this, I'm talking about government, the mind moves to just the executive arm of government. I talk about the trinity of government, the judiciary, the legislature, and also the executive arm. So government here is all-encompassing. These three arms of government, we need them to work together. But the good news is that our legislature appear, based on initiatives like this, to be playing its own part towards making this possible. There's so much global capital seeking investment destinations. But as we know, global private capital goes to where it is most welcome. And the challenge before the three arms of our government is to ensure that we attract or create or turn Nigeria into a destination for the global capital. And two, that when these investments or capital come in, we retain them in our country. So, I've been given the task of addressing how to define our capital markets by encouraging privatized and systemically important companies to list. So let me start this by making some broad observations, then I go to how I think this should be done. First is, in Nigeria, we have had many state-owned enterprises privatized, but not many of these privatized state-owned enterprises have come to the market to help deepen the capital market and help create the middle class in this country. Why is this so? What can we do to make the privatized state-owned enterprises to embrace the capital markets? We have systemically important corporations, such as the international oil companies and the telecommunication companies. These two broad, systemically important segments do not yet operate or have not accessed the Nigerian capital markets. Why is this so? What can we do to correct this? By not being listed, you can't say that they cut off the ordinary Nigerians from benefiting from our most resource endowments, especially the oil sector. How can we say we're a significant oil producer, but the major oil producing companies in the country are not reflected in our capital markets? And so our people also do not have access to investments in this sector. The creation of middle class, to a large extent, the listing of some of these privatized entities and also the assessing or listing of the systemically important companies on the market should help us broaden our middle class. And we know the strategic relevance of the middle class, just like SMEs. In the 21st century, these segments, they hold and they propel and they drive economies. And so for us, by excluding or not expanding this segment, we are actually not helping our economy to grow. So these observations call for concerted efforts, all of us, to make sure that we encourage, incentivize, and mobilize these companies to take advantage of the opportunities that exist, and so as help create access, investment opportunities for our people so that we can collectively move the economy forward. My advice is that it is indeed in the interest of these systemically important entities to be listed on the market, because it is when you democratize the access and ownership of these companies by listing them that you create shared prosperity. And that engenders shared purpose, which on its own creates a sense of mutual destiny. And when interests are aligned, we all walk in the same direction. When people feel that the prosperity being created in a sector is not only controlled by a few, but shared, it helps to help the operators in the sector to do well. So, how therefore do we attract privatized and systemically important companies, entities to the market? First, let's look at the carrot. Incentives. Incentives help significantly to shape behaviors. So I believe that we should use incentives as a mechanism for attracting the privatized companies to the market, as well as systemically important companies like IOCs and the telcos and others. So we need to look at incentives like tax holidays, ease of capital remittance, which has become an issue today in our country, expatriate quotas. So you don't just grant, you use some of these authorization requirements to shape the kind of behavior you want. Say people, privatized companies, list, then we'll make sure that when you apply for this, we accelerate it better. Reduction of transmission costs. So the DG of SEC is here, and also the CEO of Nigerian Stock Exchange is here. I think we can do a little more to reduce our transaction costs. And beyond reduction of transaction costs is also the time it takes to consummate certain capital market transactions. You know, at times, DG, you see, you have completion board meetings, and you can spend like 5 hours signing certain documents. You sign even the annual report, you sign the VAC, you see all those prospectus, you sign different things, and you ask yourself, in the 21st century, with the kind of advancement technology we have, do we have to go through all of this? So I think it calls for, please, a reassessment, a reappraisal. So I'm saying, if we introduce some incentives, it could and should actually help rational privatized companies and rational strategically, systemically important companies to take advantage, to come to the market. Second point is more flexible regulatory framework that can help to further shorten the processing times and some listing requirements. Again, to look at everything. Just like when I was in banking, there was a time we had about the process of opening an account. You can go maybe like 14 pages, account opening form, because of KYC, AML, etc. But sometimes we tax some staff and say, can we reduce this to 6 pages? They say it's impossible. We achieve 8 or 7 pages, so that's an improvement. So I'm saying is, let us look at the laws, the processes we have today, and see how we can reduce some of the requirements. It can actually help. Because at times you talk to some companies, say this onerous, the process. So let's see how we can meet ourselves midway without compromising on what is important to regulators and to the system.